coming to you again with this week's Sunday School overview. We'll be looking in this week's lesson of the friendship of David and Jonathan. Remember, all of our lessons kind of center around the idea of vocation, and the places that God places the thing, the jobs and the relationships that God places us in to be able to share His word with them. And so, like I said, we'll be looking at the friendship of David and Jonathan. This comes from First and Second Samuel. So there's a little bit of reading that goes along with this. So we'll start with God's word. It will come from 1 Samuel 18, verses 1 through 4, and then chapter 19, 1 through 7, and chapter 21 through 42, as well as 2 Samuel chapter 1, verses 17 through 27. So let us begin in God's word. As soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day, and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David, because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him, and gave it to David, and his armor, and even his sword, and his bow, and his belt. And then from chapter 19, verses 1 through 7. And Saul spoke to Jonathan his son and to all his servants, and that they should kill David. But Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted much in David. And Jonathan told David, Saul my father seeks to kill you. Therefore be on your guard in the morning. Stay in a secret place and hide yourself. And I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are. And I will speak to my father about you. And if I learn anything, I will tell you. And Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father, and said to him, Let not the king sin against his servant David, because he has not sinned against you, and because his deeds have brought you good for you. For he took his life in his hand, and he struck down the Philistine, and the Lord worked a great salvation for all Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. Why then will you sin against innocent blood by killing David without cause? And Saul listened to the voice of Jonathan. Saul swore, As the Lord lives, he shall not be put to death. And Jonathan called David, and Jonathan reported to him all these things. And Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as before. And then from 1 Samuel chapter 20, verses 1 through 42. Then David fled to the north to Naioth in Ramah, and came and said before Jonathan, What have I done? What is my guilt? And what is my sin before your father, that he seeks my life? And he said to him, Far from it. You shall not die. Behold, my father does nothing either great or small without disclosing it to me. And why should my father hide this from me? It is not so. But David vowed again, saying, Your father knows well that I have found favor in your eyes, and he thinks, Do not let Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved. But truly, as the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, there is but a step between me and death. And Jonathan said to David, Whatever you say, I will do for you. David said to Jonathan, Behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I should not fail to sit at the table with the king. But let me go, that I may hide myself in the field till the third day at evening. If your father misses me at all, then say, David earnestly asked leave of me and to run to Bethlehem his city, for there is a yearly sacrifice there for all the clan. If he says, Good, it will be well with your servant. But if he is angry, then know that harm is determined by him. Therefore deal kindly with your servant, for you have brought your servant into a covenant of the Lord with you. But if there is guilt in me, kill me yourself, for why should you bring me to your father? And Jonathan said, Far be it from you. If I knew that it was determined by my father that harm should come to you, should I not tell you? Then said to Jonathan, Who will tell me if your father answers you roughly? And Jonathan said to David, Come, let us go out into the field, so they both went out into the field. And Jonathan said to David, The Lord, the God of Israel, be witness. When I have sounded out my father about this time tomorrow, or the third day, behold, If he is well disposed toward David, shall I not then send and disclose it to you? But should it please my father to do you harm, the Lord do so to Jonathan, and more also if I do not disclose it to you, and send you away, that you may go in safety. May the Lord be with you, as he has been with my father. If I am still alive, show me the steadfast love of the Lord, that I may not die. And do not cut off your steadfast love from my house forever. Then the Lord cuts off every one of the enemies of David from the face of the earth. And Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, May the Lord take vengeance on David's enemies. And Jonathan made David swear again by his love for he loved him as he loved his own soul. Then Jonathan said to him, Tomorrow is the new moon, and you will be missed, because your seat will be empty. On the third day go down quickly to the place where you hid yourself when the matter was in hand, and remain beside the stone heap. And I will shoot 3 arrows to the side of it, as though I shot at a mark. And behold, I will send the young man, saying, Go, find the arrows. If I say to the young man, Look, the arrows are on this side of you, take them, then you are to come, for as the Lord lives, it is safe for you, and there is no danger. But if I say to you, Look, the arrows are beyond you, then go, the Lord has sent you away. And as for the matter of which you and I have spoken, behold, the Lord is between you and me forever. So David hid himself in the field, and when the new moon came, the king sat down to eat food. The king sat at his seat, and as at the other times, on the seat by the wall. Jonathan sat opposite, and Abner sat by Saul's side. But David's place was empty. Yet Saul did not say anything about that day, for he thought, Something has happened to him. He is not clean. Surely he is not clean. But on the second day, the day after the new moon, David's place was empty. And Saul said to Jonathan his son, Why has not the son of Jesse come to the meal, either yesterday or today? Jonathan answered Saul, David earnestly asked leave of me to go to Bethlehem. He said, Let me go, for our clan holds a sacrifice in the city, and my brother has commanded me to be there. So now, if I have found favor in your eyes, let me get away and see my brothers. For this reason he has not come to the king's table. Then Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan, and he said to him, You son of a perverse, rebellious woman, do I not know that you have chosen the son of Jesse to be your own shame, and to the shame of your brother's nakedness? For as long as the son of Jesse lives on the earth, neither you nor your kingdom shall be established. Therefore send and bring him to me, for he shall surely die. Then Jonathan answered Saul his father, Why should he be put to death? What has he done? But Saul hurled his spear at him to strike him. So Jonathan knew that his father was determined to put David to death. And Jonathan rose from the table in fierce anger, and ate no food the second day of the month, for he was grieved for David, because his father had disgraced him. In the morning Jonathan went out into the field to the appointment with David, and with him a little boy. And he said to this boy, Run and find the arrows that I shoot. As the boy ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. And when the boy came to the place of the arrow that Jonathan had shot, Jonathan called after the boy and said, Is not the arrow beyond you? And Jonathan called after the boy, Hurry, be quick, do not stay. So Jonathan's boy gathered up the arrows and came to his master. But the boy knew nothing. Only Jonathan and David knew the matter. And Jonathan gave his weapons to his boy and said to him, Go and carry them to the city. And as soon as the boy was gone, David arose from beside the stone heap, and fell on his face to the ground and bowed 3 times, and they kissed one another and wept with one another, David weeping the most. Then Jonathan said to David, Go in peace, because we have sworn both of us in the name of the Lord, saying, The Lord shall be between you and me, and between my offspring and your offspring forever. And he rose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. And then from 2 Samuel chapter 1, verses 17 through 27. And David lamented, and this lamentation over Saul and Jonathan his son, and he said, It should be taught to the people of Judah. Behold, it is written in the book of Jashar. He said, Your glory, O Israel, is slain on your high places. How the mighty have fallen! Tell it not in Gath, publish it not in the streets of Ashkelon, lest the daughters of the Philistines rejoice, lest the daughters of the uncircumcised exult. Your mountains of Gilboa, let there be no dew or rain upon them, nor fields of offerings. For there the shield of the mighty was defiled, and the shield of Saul not anointed with oil. For the blood of the slain, from the fat of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan turned not back, and the sword of Saul returned not empty. Saul and Jonathan, beloved and lovely, in life and in death they were not divided. They were swifter than eagles, they were stronger than lions. Your daughters of Israel weep over Saul, who clothed you luxuriously in scarlet, who put ornaments of gold on your apparel. How the mighty have fallen in the midst of the battle. Jonathan lies slain on your high places. I am distressed for you, my brother. Jonathan. Very pleasant have you been to me. Your love to me was extraordinary, surpassing the love of a woman. How the mighty have fallen, and the weapons of war perished. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Of course, there's quite a bit of reading there over these two books of the Bible, over 1st and 2nd Samuel. But it goes to the heart of this relationship between David and Jonathan, and 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 this idea of jealousy that can arise from this. And this is kind of the law gospel aspect of this. When we look to the law, we see that all around us are people who feel lonely or left out, but we often ignore them. When we see others being honored, we often become jealous. And that's what happens between David and Jonathan and Saul, who becomes jealous, and we see the strife that arises from that. But the gospel of this is that in our baptism into Christ Jesus, God has chosen and honored each of us beyond any human accolades. Jesus left his throne in heaven to befriend us, and he died on the cross so that we could be with him forever. And so, a good a good Bible verse for this week comes from John 15:13, which says, "A greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friend." And so you can teach that to the kids, let them understand that, and kind of see the depth of what God calls us how God calls us to live towards our neighbors, and to love them in a genuine brotherly love. Now, as far as the catechism, you can look here on the screen and you can see the fifth commandment: you shall not murder. What does this mean? We should fear and love God so that we do not hurt or harm our neighbor in his body, but help and support him in every physical need. Of course, we can see the ramifications. Saul, in his jealousy, continues to want to kill David. He even attempts to kill his own son Jonathan. Ultimately, we see, and what we read there in 2 Samuel, is a lament that David sings over the death of Jonathan and Saul, as they die in battle, because of Saul's wickedness and his turning from God. And so, when we look kind of at the context of this, the Lord chose David to replace disobedient King Saul. And after David was anointed king, we know that the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, as we're told. And David was called to play, later on was called to play the lyre for Saul, which revealed his spiritual torment into all of that. And Saul became even more dependent on him after David killed Goliath. And he was set over Israel's army. And then almost immediately Saul became extremely jealous of David's success. And he began to view David as a threat to his own throne, and he attempted to kill David. And Saul realized that the Lord was with David, and he became even more afraid of him. Thus, as it says, Saul was David's enemy continually. And then throughout 1 Samuel, it recounts the drama of Saul's efforts to secure his throne by killing David. And through David, and though David was anointed king by the Lord in 1025 BC, He didn't become king of Judah, that's the southern kingdom, until 1010 BC, after Saul and his son Jonathan had died. And then David became the king of Israel. And that's the northern kingdom in 1003 BC. And so when we look to this lesson, we can understand that Saul becomes jealous of David, but Saul's son Jonathan he doesn't. He befriends David, and he grew to love him unselfishly. Now you're going to often hear in modern commentary about David and Jonathan, people trying to push an agenda that there is a relationship deeper than just platonic relationship. That this is some sort of romantic relationship between David and Jonathan. It just isn't the case. There's no hint of sexual love between Jonathan and David, and it's never implied. It's not in the text. You can't be gleaned from the text. Jonathan's stripping of his garments and weapons and giving them to David reflected that covenant of self-giving friendship, and possibly even indicated that Jonathan viewed David as the heir to Saul's throne and not himself, which would have been Jonathan's by birthright. Jonathan's behavior towards David throughout their friendship is a remarkable example of loving one's neighbor as oneself, as we are told to do, to be selfless towards our neighbor, and not in any sort of, like I say, it doesn't have to be because there's a romantic relationship there, just because they are fellow children of God, and we are told to love them. Now, Saul instructs his servants and Jonathan to kill David, but Jonathan, like we heard, warns David and even intercedes with Saul to temporarily appease Saul from murdering David. But Saul's further attempts to kill David, he sent him on the run, and though Jonathan still trusted Saul, David did not, and rightly so. So they concocted this deceitful scheme to determine if Saul really was intent on killing David, and to find out, that he was. That's what we heard in chapter 20, right? Finally realizing that Saul would stop at nothing to kill David, Jonathan swore to always watch out for David's best interest. Jonathan eventually fell on the battlefield along with his father and his two brothers. And that's where David's hymn of lament over Saul and Jonathan expresses his wonder at Jonathan's unwavering friendship and his love for him. And this is where our verse for this week, Jesus says, greater love has no one than this, that somebody lay down his life for his friends. And Jesus actually went further. He died for sinners who are God's enemies, not friends, but enemies, us. Jesus was known as a friend of tax collectors and sinners, and Jesus, he stretches the bonds of our ideas of friendship to include our enemies. As he tells us, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you. Only Christ truly has accomplished such a love as this. And the most loving thing we can do for our friends is to bring them to Jesus, who is our friend in the church, in His Word, and in His sacrament. And this ties in, this theme of growing in the Word and tying into vocation. This is all about the vocation of friendship, and all of our kids that you're teaching are friends, and in that vocation, they are called to love their neighbor by sharing Jesus. And so hopefully you can help them to understand that in this lesson. So thank you for listening. I know this was a little longer than most of them because of the readings, but nonetheless, thank you for everything you've done for the Sunday school here at Bethlehem, and I look forward to seeing you again on Sunday. Have a blessed day.